before this lifestyle change, it was always like a white knuckle, get all motivated, get all psyched up to fail again. Each failure, you learn and learn until you finally find that breakthrough. And we've been unpacking a lot of my breakthroughs, and a lot of it is really that believing that you can. But before you can ever really have belief, you got to start somewhere.
All right, it's another great episode of Weight Loss and Abs. How you doing, Dr. Chris?
Oh, I am doing awesome. Absolutely awesome.
So you're weight loss, I'm abs. It's going to eventually, though, it might have to switch to abs and abs down the road. But for now, we'll have to stick with weight loss and abs.
I'm getting close, because I've lost 130 pounds, there's some loose skin. But if you look behind the loose skin, there is like some remnants of some lines, some definition. Yeah. So it's coming.
It'll tighten up. Yeah, we'll be there. So abs and abs, that'll be the 2027 version or something. We'll have to change it to abs and abs.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and if you're listening or watching for the first time, Dr. Chris, at this point, it has been like 135 pounds that you've lost to date.
Yes, and close to 100 pounds just in this year alone.
Unbelievable. And what's fascinating about the journey for me is I was there at the beginning. Years ago, when we first met, gosh, it's got to be 5 years ago or so. I still remember meeting you in that room, that little breakout room at one of the seminars we were both attending, and you asked for help. And I thought, we got a lot of work to do. and so
now, you didn't say that at the time. You were very nice. It was like, yeah, we can. Absolutely.
Well, so I remember I gave him like, let me get you a book that I wrote. That was the Winning the Inside Battle Wellness. I'm like, read this first. That'll give us a little bit of a starting point. But, these things are a journey, and that's what we're trying to give people the hope that, it might be difficult now. There might be a lot of failure after failure after failure, but it is a journey. Like each of those failures don't exist in a vacuum. Like they're all part of a process that eventually gets them to a place like you're in right now.
Absolutely. I think God has our hand on us, and you fail, but then you learn from that failure. If you don't learn from your failure, don't learn from your mistakes, then you're not growing.
Yeah, so I think that's the encouragement of the day is that every failed diet, every time you've quit the gym, every time you've gotten off track, that it's part of a long-term process where you kind of get to that point where you're sick of getting off track. You're sick of not getting to the gym again. You're finally tired enough of it where that's part of it too. It's just you're ready to finally go. But I also really think if you look at the psychology, I always like to get back into my master's in psychology work, which one of the reasons I went back to school to get that degree was specifically to understand this. Like, why do people struggle to stick with a lifestyle plan? As doctors and as somebody who's taught fitness and taught nutrition and written 20 books on all of this, one of the things that could be quite frustrating, I've had some really frustrating years there where like, man, nobody sticks to it. I've started hundreds of patients, sold millions of books, and nobody's doing it. Like nobody's doing the plan. What's the reason behind that? And that's really, again, one of the drivers to going back and cracking the books on this. And a lot of it really just is the habits you have right now are aggressively wired in. So back when you might only have been able to stick to your diet for a day or a meal or two, it's because everything in your being, down to the DNA, down to every neuron in your brain, is saying go back to the habits you have, go back to the patterns that you've developed over decades versus the ones you're trying to create in a matter of hours. You got to think about it. If you're 30 years old trying to lose weight, you got 30 years of stuff baked into your neurons that's all bad habits. And all of a sudden now overnight you're expecting to start eating well. It's not going to work that way. But as you keep working on it, which you don't realize, again, above the surface, it just looks like failure. But beneath the surface, you're literally reprogramming, you're recoding your brain and your habits.
Oh, absolutely. Because before this lifestyle change, where my whole mindset changed, it was always like a white knuckle, flexing the guns and just, get all motivated, get all psyched up to fail again. But like I said, each failure you learn and learn until you finally find that breakthrough,
Yeah.
And we've been unpacking a lot of my breakthroughs, and a lot of it is really that believing that you can. But before you can ever really have belief, you got to start somewhere. You got to start the journey. And we both really enjoy taking vitamins. Vitamins is probably a key component to my weight loss. And, I'll back this story up just a little bit. So I have a vet that comes in, and we recently got a dog, and his name is Ryder, and he is gorgeous. He's a Great Dane, and he's a year old. And for many of you dog lovers, you know that larger dogs don't last that long, and a lot of hip dysplasia, a lot of knee and joint and other issues. So anyway, the vet comes in, and I had a spare moment. I said, "Hey, doc, do you know of any vitamins or supplements that I can give Ryder to help him? He's young now. He can jump 10 feet in the air right now. How do I help sustain him?" And he said, "Doc, it's not so much about the supplement, which are all fine, and I can give you recommendations. It's about the food quality that he eats." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." And so he said, in the research in veterinary and dog food, okay, specifically, is your lower end dog foods, they use a lot of fillers in them. Fillers such as feathers and husk of corn, and in a lab, they can find that there's nutritional value in these cheap byproduct items. However, what he said is they're nutritionally valuable for a cow, an animal that has 4 stomachs. Well, your dog and you are mono stomach, one stomach. And so you can't handle those byproducts. So it's not a good food for you. And so it boils down to the right foods. And we've talked about this, Dr. Lerner, is the supplements that we take. There's a lot of fillers in our supplements, which I had no idea until we actually met. And I was curious on how do you know if you've got a good supplement or not? But, what are they doing to us? Why do they do that?
Yeah, so let's take it up to 30,000 feet for a second. Because in a future show, by the way, we'll get into supplements that help your body lose weight. So we'll touch on that more in the future. Those will be some fun episodes. But one of the things that we know about nutrition, I'm glad you brought up the dog. So my daughter's going to be a vet. So she's working as a vet tech now. She's gotten into a vet school, and so she'll be working on that career here in about 3 months. But she's been in the veterinary field now for about a year, just kind of prepping, and she only works for vets and only gets involved with different clinics that are really into nutrition. And this is not a show about dogs, but it's interesting how dogs are similar to humans, where if you give them the wrong foods, you'll make them sick and maybe kill them. So we all work the same way. The wrong food makes you sick, makes you overweight, and can kill you, as can anything else that contains inappropriate materials, like you said, whether it's feathers or whether it's the filler and the vitamins that were given to a dog or a human, that we have a penalty we pay for putting the wrong things in our body. And so what's really neat with my daughter's clinic is that you'll come in, bring whatever sick pet you have, and the way they're treating them is, well, here's their new diet, here's their new supplementation. They also do adjustments, and they'll do acupuncture. They'll do natural things to put this person on track, or this dog rather, on track like we would a person. And people get miraculous results just by changing their food and their lifestyle, just like with a human. And so the thing we have to realize is that even something, being overweight, can actually be tied to toxicity. So toxins bind to fats and make them impossible to lose, or really hard to lose. So people end up often being weight loss resistant, where a key reason is because continuously putting wrong materials in their body, becoming toxic as a result of those things, and then the body won't lose the weight. And so a detox is often a great way to start a weight loss program, because we're trying to get as many of these toxins binding to fats out of our body so our body can actually finally release the fat. So just a quick note on being overweight and the topic of the day. So as we talk
Well, I
about,
want
yeah,
to.
go ahead.
Well, it was just you said something that I'm going to ask a question for myself personally, and maybe this will help somebody else. But I've noticed that when in the beginning of my weight loss, because I'm 130 down, in the beginning it was slow, it was very hard, and there's, I would assume, toxicity in my body that made it hard to get there. And once I reached a tipping point, once I got past about 300 pounds, because I was at 370, now I'm at like 240. So once I reached that tipping point, it was about 300, 295, when I started really losing. And so would it be fair to say that that toxicity in my body that I had to fight through, now my weight loss has become extremely easy because I've gotten rid of those toxicity cells in my fat cells?
Yeah, there's all these layers of weight loss resistance. I see a lot of patients who deal with this issue, like, no matter what I do, you've heard this before, no matter how little I eat, no matter how much I exercise, I can't lose a gram. In fact, I keep gaining weight. We call that weight loss resistance. It's not even, the math isn't even mathing. They're taking in 100 calories, burning 1,200 calories. So they're supposed to have an 1,100 calorie deficit, and they don't have it. Or they have it, yet they're not losing weight, so that the math isn't making any sense for them because their body's so resistant to losing weight. And so so toxicity is a big reason you get stuck. By the way, in the dog thing too, my daughter has a theory, as do some of the vets that she's working with, that this is why dogs die so young. So it's very frustrating, how young the dogs die. But if you think about it, it's pretty unmitigated. Nobody's really standing in the gap and saying, hey, why do all these dog foods have all these toxins in them and fillers like you mentioned? What about the vaccines and the medications we force on our animals? Have we ever studied, is that the reason dogs die when they're 6 or 7, and why a dog, 1 year for a dog is 7 human years? Is there a reason for that? And there's really no regulation. You don't see anybody appalled by everything we're injecting our dogs with and all the stuff we're feeding our dogs. And so, of course, they're doing poorly. And so, thankfully for my dog, my dog's nutritionist, and my dog's not been injected with anything. Everything's always been natural. And so, we're hoping to get much more longevity out of our dog than the typical dog.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so getting back to humans, so when you talk about vitamins, let's just use, for simplicity's sake, vitamin C. So if you're taking vitamin C, what should be in the product is vitamin C. There shouldn't be other things in it. You shouldn't see a bunch of other things listed on the product. So when people bring me their supplements to evaluate, which every day somebody brings me a bag of supplements, first thing I do is I turn it over and I look underneath where it's saying C or D or E or whatever, and I look at the fillers. And if I'm seeing all kinds of different things that are not the vitamin, even some of the better brands, you're seeing, rice and honey and yeast and soy. Somebody showed me one that they really loved, and soy was one of the fillers. I said, are you somebody who would do soy products? And they're like, no, I know they're estrogenic, they cause cancer, they're bad for you, they make you fat. I'm like, yeah, there's really nothing good about soy, but you realize you're eating soy every single day that you swallow this supplement. And then, sometimes it's somewhat tongue-in-cheek, kind of kidding around, but how are you with magnesium stearate? So is that something that you want to be a major part of your diet? Well, just so you know, you're swallowing it every single day when you take your supplement. So we've got to really watch, first of all, the additives to the supplement. Then we'll get into dosing, and we'll get into forms also. But those additives are the first thing that can really be a problem.
Absolutely. So, and maybe in the show notes we can add in some a list of what to look for as far as fillers and things like that. So, those that are watching can go, okay, avoid X, Y, and Z for sure. But you mentioned dosing. So how much do we need, of what?
Yeah. So dosing,
because sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but like, I'm here in Indiana and we're losing the sun. We have no sun anymore for the next 6 months. And so everybody's vitamin D levels drop, and people say, well, yeah, I'm on like 5,000 milligrams of vitamin D and my vitamin D is still low. So, kind of, I want to know more of dosage, because that seems like a high dosage. Why aren't they, through the roof in their vitamin D levels?
Yeah, and dosing is very specific to a person's needs and a person's body. So let's use D for an example. So it's really a misunderstood issue when you talk about dosing D, because D, the way you handle D is you first of all do a blood test. So you figure out how much D is in your body, and it'll drive you crazy to look on the lab, because the lab will say you're normal if you're within 30 to 100. So that's what the lab shows. So obviously, if you're at 99 or 31, that's a radically different amount of D in your system. So which one is it? Is it 99 or is it 31? So if you go to the studies, there were some great studies that came out during COVID that showed once those D levels hit 80, you stopped dying from COVID. Like, that's how important D is in your body. Like, it saves your life. And this was a study done on thousands of people throughout Europe. And so we know that we got to be 80 or around 80. So all those people with a normal 30 where their doctor's going, yeah, you're good. It's not flagged. There's no little yellow flag on your lab or an L on your lab. You're at 30, so you're fine. Those doctors are like literally putting your life at risk, because D is critical to the function of over 900 genes. It's involved in 900 genes of some of your most important genes in your body. And actually, recently I saw one that showed it to be over 1,000. These genes all have a vitamin D receptor, meaning they require D in order to express themselves in a healthy way. So that's a lot of genes. And we know that low D causes inflammation, increased risk of cancer, increased risk of heart disease, depression. Like, it's a critical nutrient, yet few people are measuring it, and when they do, the doctor tells them they're fine. There's a Dr. Roberts, Sandra Roberts, who's like medical doctor, considered like the mom, like the matriarch of functional medicine, and she did my lab evaluation, and my D was at a 70, and I'm like, oh, well, at least my D's pretty good. She looked at it and said, you've got to do something about your D. I'm like, wow, my D is way better than my patient's. She's like, if it's not 80, you're not good. Like, the number's 80. Mm-hmm. So in terms of dosing, if I'm under 80, that means I should be taking 10, 20,000, 50,000 a day. Like, you're not going to take too much until you're past 100. So it's not how much you're taking per day, it's how much you need to take a day to get yourself to 80, and then you wouldn't stay on a clinical dose. Because if you get to 100 plus, I have seen people go over 100 because they just heard, hey, D is good for me. So just pounding D every day, and then they get over 100, and I've watched that tank other parts of their blood work because it's too much. But up to 100, you're fine, and it's within the range. Now, the other issue is there's a lot of things that block D. So if you're overweight, it blocks your absorption of D. If you have certain genes, there's a VDR gene variant that's common that blocks the ability to absorb D well. So there's all kinds of reasons that you may not actually absorb the D. And so that's why, you do the new blood test. So I've had people taking, say, 10,000 IUs a day to try to get their D levels up. We retest them, and it went up like by 5. Like, it just didn't move that much. I'm like, yeah, you've got some reason you don't absorb D well. We're going to move you to 20,000 to do a better job of moving the needle. And some people, it's 50,000, to try to get them to a reasonable level of D in their bodies. So dosing is very specific to our bodies, a test to make sure to see where we're at. But with cheap vitamins, if you read the label, there's so little in there usually, that's why they're cheap, or it's the wrong form. It's some toxic version of the nutrient, so it's really not doing anything in your body anyways.
Well, and that was going to be my next question, was the form, because I remember at a seminar and that we were both attending, really you were speaking and I was attending. But you said, because you developed your own vitamin company, now you sold that, but however, when you designed it, you wanted the best of the best. And so, and you go to a manufacturer facility. Maybe I'm misspeaking, but
That's
speaking of
accurate.
vitamin
That's
C.
accurate. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So the vitamin C, on the bottom shelf is the cheap stuff. And then you go up here and it's so much better because it's the right form. It's something that your body can absorb. But I'm curious to learn more about how do why do they make it where you can't utilize it? Is it cheaper to make?
Yeah, it's money.
Or
So obviously you go to Walmart, you go to Walgreens, you go to Costco, and the vitamins are cheap. And the thing is that if you think about like gold and silver, so gold, if you've ever tried to buy any gold or sell any gold, for an example, I think gold is $4,000 an ounce right now. So if I say to you, Chris, hey, I've got some gold here, it's an ounce, and it's $2,000. Give me $2,000. What you're about to buy is not gold, because gold is $4,000 an ounce. You can't get it for $2,000. You can't get it for $3,999. It's $4,000 an ounce. That's just the cost of gold. Well, vitamin C, B vitamins, vitamin D, whatever you're buying, there's just a cost of that product. If it's a healthy version of the product, the right form and the right material, it has a cost. So if suddenly you're buying vitamin C for $5, then what I tell people is eat the bottle and throw out the vitamin C, because the bottle is going to be healthier for you. Or I'll tell them just dump it down the toilet and cut out the middleman, because this stuff isn't absorbing in your cells anyways. It's just toxic sludge. So you got, price is one thing to really be looking at. If that multivitamin's, $8 or $12, then I don't know what's in there, but it's not vitamins in any sort of level that's going to help you. And certainly there's going to be toxic forms. So for example, generally when you go to like one of these cheap places to buy vitamins, it'll have methylcobalamin. Well, instead of methylcobalamin, it'll have cyanocobalamin. So methylcobalamin, a lot of people have heard this now. You need to be taking the methylated version of most B vitamins. That's what's required to have those vitamins actually absorbed in your body. But they're going to be more expensive than, say, cyanocobalamin or like folic acid instead of folate. So folate's the methylated version, the healthy version of B9. Folic acid is the fake version. And so in the cheap vitamins, it's going to have folic acid. It might even be in your prenatal. Hey, make sure you're getting enough folic acid. I see that a lot. Make sure women who are pregnant are taking folic acid. No, they need to be taking folate. Folic acid is the synthetic cheap version and actually blocks the body's ability to absorb real folate to help the baby in development. Same thing with cyanocobalamin. That cyano actually comes from cyanide. So it's a synthetic toxic version, and it's in most of the stuff that you pick up at the grocery store, or again at one of these cheap big box stores. So the price is really something to look at. It should be more expensive than you're used to paying. It shouldn't be a fortune, but it should be like a multivitamin. I would say, look in the sort of the $35 to $40 range. That at least shows you they should have some level of ingredients here that are actually helpful and probably less toxic.
Well, and just thinking about 30, 40, $50 that you spend on a monthly multivitamin will save you, it's hard to say, mathematically, but probably thousands of medical bills down the road. Or, more importantly, and I think this is why I lost the weight, is, I was losing time with my boys. I have 4 young boys, and I was losing quality time. And so by having the right nutrients in our bodies, we have that quality time. You mentioned a term, and I want to make sure that everybody listening knows and understands this term: methylated versions of, you gave the example of B vitamins. What does that mean? Why do you want a methylated version of that versus standard, or whatever the appropriate term for that is?
Yeah, I mean, so for one, it's the healthy form. So that's the form that the body can actually utilize. But another thing is that most people have become aware, it's been out there on the internet and social media, is the fact that a lot of people have this MTHFR gene, which is a lag in your ability or an inability to actually methylate. And so we won't absorb non-methylated B vitamins anyways, and then you end up having a B vitamin deficiency that can lead to a number of issues like, for example, B vitamin deficiency is going to raise homocysteine levels, which is a way more of a risk factor for a heart attack than, say, high cholesterol is. And so it's important, again, with all these nutrients that you're getting the version that could be absorbed and used by your body. And then there's a lot of, we spend hours on this topic, but for example, like with vitamin D, you don't want to just take vitamin D3 by itself. I mean, if you watch the evolution, they used to have vitamin D2 that was out on the market, and that's actually a toxic version that's going to block the absorption of D3 and not really do your body all that much good. So then we knew, okay, make sure it's D3. Well, eventually we learned you have to also have the K2 in there so that as the D gets into a healthy level in your system and starts creating more bone, that bone ends up on the bone and not in your arteries. And we now know you need K2. That's evolved further to know that we also need to make sure we have adequate magnesium levels also for a balance of how that D interacts with bone and other tissues in your body. So, as hopefully people are picking up, just taking random supplements is a great way to get toxic. It's a great way to really potentially hurt yourself. But at the same token, you need, like you started the show with, we like to take vitamins. You need vitamins in order to function. It's very unlikely you'll get enough nutrients, certain specific nutrients in particular, just through diet, so they are really important. But you really should get some help. Go into a clinic like yours, go into a clinic like mine, and get some guidance. And then when it comes to pricing, I always say the same thing, which is the most cost-effective vitamin is the one that's working. So if you bought a cheap vitamin, it's not working. You just threw out $5 and you're poisoning yourself. You just lost $5. If you spent $50, but you're not poisoning yourself and you're adding value to your health and minimizing medical costs in the future, it was a lot. That $50 was a lot cheaper investment than the $5 was.
Absolutely. Well, and I think the biggest, because I'm a big hope person. I like to give hope, and so obviously, hopefully my story of losing so much weight is giving somebody that's listening hope. But a lot of us that are overweight, obese, we feel like we have to white knuckle it. So just taking the right supplements, getting a good quality supplement will actually make you feel a little bit better. And obviously there's a cascade. There's you throw a stone into the water and there's the ripple effects. So the ripple effect would be you feel better. So you move a little bit more, you start to exercise more, you start to change some of the eating habits that you're already doing. You don't have to change all of them right away, but just that one small change of taking your supplements and being consistent with it, then you become that person that I am fighting for my health rather than destroying my health. And I think that can be, for a lot, that can be a bit of a game changer, one piece at a time, changing the whole psychology of how you think and think of yourself.
Amen. Well, thanks for watching, everybody. Have hope. Keep going. You'll get there. Bless you. And remember who you are.